Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Marc Givler, joined as always by Chip Minnich. We are continuing our 2025 schedule analysis of all 18 Big Ten teams. The last one we did was Wisconsin. We did not like Wisconsin's schedule. We thought it was pretty brutal. They did not get a great draw. It was not conducive, maybe to accomplishing the goals that Wisconsin wants to accomplish. Let's take a look at the other side of the coin here, because I think this one is very much a 180 from what we just did. And we're going to take a look at the Illinois Fighting Illini's 2025 schedule. Before we do that real quick, obviously this is like, Chip, this is maybe the highest expectations of an Illinois team in how long? I mean, years, right?
Oh, yes. I mean, like, if anything, that would be the biggest concern that Illinois fans should have, is that historically when Illinois is expected to do well, it's kind of, okay, they haven't realized those expectations. So it's going to be interesting to see if Brett Bielema and his team can fulfill the high expectations that not just you and I have, but it seems like pretty much the college football world has of Illinois going into the 2025 season.
Yeah, I mean, the polls aren't out, but like some of the metrics and things like that have them ranked like 11th in the country going into the season. I do think they're a top 15 team coming into the season with what they have returning and what they were able to accomplish last year. And then we look at the schedule, and this is as generous of a Big Ten schedule as you're going to find, in my opinion, Chip.
Oh, easily. I mean, this is the inverse of what Wisconsin is dealing with. I mean, if anything, you look at the non-conference games, I realize that Duke is not necessarily a pushover per se, that Manny Diaz has been doing a decent job down there, but I'm going to say Illinois starts out 3-0, and I'm going to just say it right now on the record, that game at Indiana, that is going to be very much in the category of must-see TV for Big Ten football, simply because Indiana was a surprise team of last year. Illinois was, you've heard me say this over and over, Illinois was certainly in the same kind of general category. And I think, if Illinois can win that game, they have a very strong possibility of being undefeated when Ohio State comes to town October 11th before they have their first bye.
Yeah, this is a fascinating schedule. And look, there's some game. They got to show up. You got to show up at Duke. You got to show up at Indiana. Obviously, is going to be an interesting test. I think that's a huge game for both those teams. I think the winner of that game is thinking playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have playoffs on their mind. You got to show up at home against USC, obviously. At Washington will be an interesting game. It's never easy at Camp Randall, but look, the way I've got the Big Ten tiered this year is I think the bottom three teams are in their own bottom tier. I think it's Maryland, Northwestern, and Purdue. They've got them all three on the schedule. We've seen teams that haven't gotten any of those three on the schedule, and they get all three of them on their schedule. Two of them are at home. They get Rutgers at home. They get USC at home on a cross-country flight. And they get Ohio State. You get Ohio State, but you get them at home. And you get them at home after you play Purdue, so you should be fine, to get through that Purdue game. And you got a bye week after that before you have to go out to Washington. This is a fantastic schedule for a team that's hoping to win 10 games, get into the playoffs. And quite frankly, if they survive that Ohio State game, look, if they're so the first 6 games, Ohio State's their 6th game. If they're 5-1 after the Ohio State game, they are a lock for the playoffs.
Yes.
I don't think there's any way they lose 2 of those last games, 2 of those last 6 games or whatever it is. So yeah. This is I don't know. This is tremendous. This is a dream come true, almost a dream schedule. Is there? Even if they have 2 losses out of the Ohio State game, I still think they're in pretty good shape, right?
Oh, certainly.
The Ohio State game is the 7th game. So if they come out, so 6-1 or 5-2 out of that Ohio State game, I think they're in great shape for the playoffs.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think not only the way that the schedule lines up, but even the buys. Let's face it. I mean, the fact that, okay, they play Ohio State, that'll be a tough matchup. And we talked about this when we were looking at Ohio State's schedule, that you asked me if there was a landmine for Ohio State, and I identified the Illinois game as that game is what could trip up Ohio State. But since we're talking about Illinois, the fact that, let's say, best case scenario, that Ohio State comes into Champaign, hands them their first loss, the fact that they've got a week off before they have to make a cross-country trip to Washington, and we're anticipating Washington being better, but I just think they're going to be in a really good spot in terms of just, being well rested. The fact that they get to come home and play against Rutgers, which is kind of, again, just kind of in that competitive tier, but they're not necessarily considered to be the top of the conference. And then, like you said, Mark, they get not only a bye week, but some of the fact that they get to play Maryland and Northwestern both at home in the latter portion of the schedule. If anything, this might be kind of like their opportunity to be putting up some style points for the committee to try and get into the playoff, because I think that they're going to be just very well positioned.
And like at Wisconsin's not a layup, but you're getting them at the end of the year after they've went through. We just talked about it. Yes, you can go watch that episode if you want. We that was our previous one, and that Wisconsin team could be like on fumes at that point, given the schedule they have to play. So you're getting Wisconsin probably at a good time there, but like just their last four games, last 5 weeks of the season, they have 3 home games against against 2 of the worst teams in the conference, and then a mid-tier team, and a bye in their last 5 weeks. I mean, if you can just get through that Ohio State game without having wrecked your season already, you are in great shape. So again, like, where's a landmine game here for them?
I don't want to call it a landmine. I'm just going to say that I'm going to say that Washington game, and the only reason I'm kind of stammering on this is that I'm giving Ohio State the win against Illinois at home, and then, like I said a few moments ago, the fact that they have a bye week, that you never know how they respond coming off of a loss. I mean, it could be a close loss, it could be a very lopsided. I mean, who knows? And then that cross country trip to Washington, we have no idea if that's going to be a night game. Is that going to be something where how well Washington might be playing? So it just really depends on how they respond to what you and I both believe is going to be a loss to Ohio State, how they come out of their bye week. Are they properly motivated? So I don't want to call it a landmine, just to make sure that they are kind of getting into the second part of their schedule in the right frame of mind.
Yeah. Here's a weird one for me for like a landmine game. This is kind of hilarious. Like the idea that this would be a landmine game for them and not like the other team is hilarious. I look at USC at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're going to come off that's going to be a really interesting game at Indiana, the 4th week of the season. And so you're playing your 5th game in 5 weeks. Maybe you get a big road win in Indiana. You better be ready to go against USC. They do have some talent. I've kind of been all out on Lincoln Riley, but it's desperation time for Lincoln Riley. He's got to win some games this year. Just got to be a little careful on that. They're going to have enough talent to beat you if you don't play well. So I look at that one maybe. I think the Washington one was a decent call. Maybe Rutgers at home. Like if you beat Washington, like if you're riding high, you're I don't know, you're like 7-1, you just beat Washington on the road, and you think you're just going to come home and just show up and hand, a loss to Rutgers, and, Schiano's always got some tricks up his sleeve. And so that's maybe one, but gosh, this is a great schedule for them. 10 wins here is very doable. And if they win 10, they're in the playoff.
Yeah. Something you just said about Rutgers that crossed my mind. It's very easy to forget. Rutgers had Illinois beat last year at home. And then it was just kind of, I don't want to call it a fluke, but it was if anything, Greg Schiano had to just been kicking himself in terms of the defensive coverage and the collapse that allowed Illinois to snatch, victory from the jaws of defeat, on the last play of the game. That Rutgers has to just still be smarting over that. Now, granted, Pat Bryant has taken his talents onto the NFL. Luke Altmaier is still there for Illinois. But I just think, when it comes to Illinois at home, I just think it's going to be that I think the fans have every reason to be excited about this year's team.
Yeah. So best case scenario, worst case scenario for Illinois.
I'm going to say best case scenario. Wow. I'm looking at this and I'm going to say that they win. I'm going to go 10 wins. I'm going to give them a loss at home against Ohio State. So that will be their first loss. And then I'm going to say that when they make that cross-country trip to Washington, that would be their second loss. I'm going to say best case scenario that they win 10 games. I'm saying worst case scenario, they might get tripped up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just say I'd say worst case scenario that they go 6-6, like that they stumble in the non-conference game against Duke. Maybe they lose some of the games that we've talked about, the fact they go to Indiana, like you referred to the potential landmine game against USC. I think Ohio State is going to be the clear favorite, possibly, like I said, that cross-country trip to Washington, and maybe they get tripped up going into Camp Randall, which is always a difficult thing. I would say worst case scenario, they're still a bowl team, but I think best case scenario is certainly just the way that schedule lines up. I think the best case scenario is more likely outcome.
Yeah. And so Illinois fans are either going to love me or they're going to hate me for thinking them. I think the best case scenario is 11-1.
Yeah.
And I see two paths to 11-1. I see a path where they lose to Ohio State and just beat everybody else. And I see a path where they do become Ohio State's landmine game. It's not Ryan Day hasn't lost many of those at Ohio, or really any of those at Ohio State. He generally loses only to like the games like to Michigan, basically, and like
right.
Big non-league game. He doesn't really lose to anybody else. But I could see them stealing that one, and then maybe they have a letdown and they lose at Washington, or they lose at Wisconsin, or maybe even Indiana gets them early in the season or something. But I think best case is 11-1, and I think worst case is 8-4. I don't know how they go worse than 8-4, barring some type of major injury problem, like Altmaier gets hurt and misses a significant amount of time, or they just have this rush of injuries. I don't see where. Again, I like worst case, I'm looking, okay, so they lose to Indiana, they lose to Ohio State, they lose to Washington, and then like they drop either the Wisconsin game or the USC game. Like, to me, that's like the worst case scenario is they go 8-4. I think everyone would be disappointed by that in Champaign. I think everyone would be disappointed by that. I know I would be. I don't think they're an 8-4 team with the schedule. So I think, I think you look at it right now, I think they're going to go 10-2. I think 9-3 or 10-2 is the realistic range, but again, we're doing best case, worst case. So I think, they could go, there's a path to 11-1, there's a path to 8-4, but I think they're a 9 or 10 win team this year. And if you can get an over under, that would give you decent odds on it, like an over 8.5 or an over 8 or something like that. I'd be all over that. But so are we like officially the Illinois hype train at this point?
We might be, and again, I mean, it just seems so strange because kind of what we've talked about previously, it's like my memories of Illinois football, again, when I was younger, like Illinois was more offensively oriented, when I was younger. And then, in the 90s, it was kind of under Lou Tepper was more defensive oriented. And then they just had this, they were consistently inconsistent, put it that way. I mean, like between the Ron Turner, Ron Zook eras, and then it seems as though they finally recognized the fact that, okay, with Brett Bielema, for all of his, faults and failings, the guy is pretty much, he is going to build a consistently physical football team that is going to make you work for everything you get. I realize he's not everybody's cup of tea. That's fine. I agree with you. I think, like it's kind of good for the game to have somebody that likes to stir the pot, and he does. And yeah, I mean, if anything, we talked about at the onset, if anything, Illinois, this is, we're not necessarily trying to, be the hype leader, so to speak, but it's like the schedule, the returning talent, the coaching. If anything, it's okay. Can Illinois manage these high expectations that not just you and I have, but it seems like, the college football world is anticipating a big year for the Fighting Illini.
Yeah, like this really isn't like just us. Like again,
Right.
the metrics have Illinois 11th. Like these advanced metrics, and who knows, what will the polls say? We'll see. Will they be high? I tend to think the polls may be a little more conservative with that. I tend to think the polls may look at them more in the 15, 16 range than 11. I think 11 probably with the metrics is probably taking the schedule more into account than I don't know that pollsters really take the schedules into account, because I think they're just ranking like best teams in a vacuum versus how they'll finish. But yeah, like this is their best team in a long time. And I agree with you completely. For me, it is okay. You're not sneaking up on anybody this year. While your schedule isn't particularly difficult, you aren't going to sneak up on teams. You're not going to sneak up on the Ohio States, the USCs of the world. So how do you manage maybe having a little bit of a target on your back this year, and kind of having the tables turned on you a little bit? So that'll be interesting. But one thing's for sure, we're either going to be looking really good in late November with all of our Illinois hype, or we're going to be sitting here apologizing to everybody about talking up Illinois all off season.
I agree.
Yep. So, all right, guys. Well, that's enough. That's enough Illinois hype for one day, right? Exactly. So we'll get out of here. We got more schedules coming. What are we, 4 down, 14 to go?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Keep it locked in here as we go team by team and look at everyone's 25 schedule and make our predictions. Thanks everyone again for watching and listening. We will talk to you soon.